Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of First Esdras, the first chapter. And so far we've gone through, a couple of books really dealing with the time period of the, around the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and, around that time of when the Lord sent them to come against Jerusalem, which at this point the northern kingdom had already been, the bulk of them had already been deported from the land. So the main, portion of Israelites that were left were of the southern kingdom, although you had remnants of the northern kingdom mingled amongst them. Okay, and so in books like in the book of Ezekiel, it goes into eventually how Israelites get sent as captives into Babylon. The book of Daniel also deals around the same time, Habakkuk as well. And so in the book of First Esdras, we deal with getting to the end of the Babylonian Empire and the rising of the Persian Empire. All right, and so just sort of gonna kick off with that. And I believe you also have the book of Zechariah and Haggai, which also were contemporaries around this time, right? The Lord put the spirit on them to go and prophesy, to get the Israelites that had left from Babylon and gone back to Jerusalem to go and build the house of the Lord, because that was the main reason that Cyrus had also mentioned, for them to be able to go back and build the house of the Lord. Okay, so let's get into it. So this is First Esdras chapter 1, verse 1. And Josiah held the feast of the Passover in Jerusalem unto his Lord, and offered the Passover the 14th day of the first month. Now in this chapter, it does a main portion of it is a recap of what happens. It mainly goes into Josiah, and what he did, and then after that, how the Lord brought the Babylonians against against Israel, and how we ended up in captivity. Okay, so it says here, verse 2, having set the priests according to their daily courses, being arrayed in long garments in the temple of the Lord, right? Because you had the priests, which had, you had priests of different family lines that had particular jobs or roles to play. Some were in charge of the incense, some of the sacrifices, and so on and so forth. Verse 3, and he spake unto the Levites, the holy ministers of Israel, that they should hallow themselves unto the Lord, to set the holy ark of the Lord Yahweh in the house that King Solomon the son of David had built. So at this point, we know that King Solomon had actually built this temple, and to hallow themselves, meaning to sanctify themselves, right? Because if they were going to have to move the ark, they had to be sanctified. So verse 4, and said, ye shall no more bear the ark upon your shoulders. Now therefore serve the Lord your God, and minister unto his people Israel, and prepare you after your families and kindreds, according as David the king of Israel prescribed, and according to the magnificence of Solomon his son, and standing in the temple according to the several dignity of the families of you the Levites, who minister in the presence of your brethren, the children of Israel. So they wouldn't need to bear the ark upon their shoulders anymore, because now they would have, at this point, at least in their mind, a permanent settlement where the ark would stay, and that's within the temple that Solomon had built. And so continuing here, and as it says, as David the king prescribed, and when you read, I believe it's in the book of Kings, King David had at one point appointed different courses for the Levites, like roles for them to play in terms of in the temple relating to certain work that needed to be done. Okay. And that's why here it's mentioned about standing in the temple according to the several dignity of the families of you, the Levites, because different families were appointed to play different roles. Verse 6, offer the Passover in order and make ready the sacrifices for your brethren, and keep the Passover according to the commandment of the Lord, which was given unto Moses. And unto the people that was found there, Josiah's, or as in this translation, it says Josias, but we know his name was Josiah, right? And then you'll see like some other names are spelled slightly different here, but it's referring to the same individuals anyway. So it says here, Josiah gave 30,000 lambs and kids, and a kid is just a baby goat, 3,000 calves. These things were given of the king's allowance, according as he promised to the people, to the priests, and to the Levites. And Hilkiah, Zechariah, and Silas, the governors of the temple, gave to the priests for the Passover 2,600 sheep and 300 calves. So that's a lot of, work that they were going to have to do. And Jechonias and Samaias, and Nathaniel, his brother, and Asabias, and Okiel, and Joram, captains over thousands, gave to the Levites for the Passover 5,000 sheep and 700 calves. That is a lot. And when these things were done, the priests and Levites, having the unleavened bread, stood in very calmly order, according to the kindreds, and according to the several dignities of the fathers, before the people, to offer to the Lord, as it is written in the book of Moses, and thus did they in the morning. So basically, they started these offerings, in the morning, because it was a lot. And they roasted the Passover with fire, as appertaineth. As for the sacrifices, they sawed them in brass pots and pans with a good savor. So the Passover we know was the lamb, right? And the remaining of the sacrifices, it says here, they sawed them. When you sawed it, you boil it, okay, in brass pots with pans and with a good savor, and set them before all the people. And afterward they prepared for themselves. So they first prepared for the people, and then for themselves, and for the priests, their brethren, the sons of Aaron. And the priests offered the fat until night. So they were basically doing these offerings all day, because once again, it was a lot. And as it says, they offered the fat until night, and the Levites prepared for themselves, and the priests, their brethren, the sons of Aaron. The holy singers also, the sons of Asaph, were in their order, according to the appointment of David, to wit, Asaph, Zacharias, and Jeduthun, who was of the king's retinue. And when you look that up, the word retinue basically means like the king's court, or those that would be in the inner circle of the king that would accompany the king wherever he would go. Okay, so as you can see, this the different ordinances, and different roles were it was pretty vast, right? The different things that the Levites had to do. Verse 16, moreover, the porters were at every gate, and the porters are the gatekeepers. It was not lawful for any to go from his ordinary service, for their brethren the Levites prepared for them. So as a porter, their job was to gatekeep, was to be at the gate, so you couldn't just leave your post. And so, like it says, the Levites prepared for them, right? They prepared their portions for them. Verse 17, thus were the things that belonged to the sacrifices of the Lord accomplished in that day, that they might hold the Passover, and offer sacrifices upon the altar of the Lord, according to the commandment of King Josiah. So the children of Israel, which were present, held the Passover at that time, and the feast of sweet bread 7 days, which is really the feast of unleavened bread. So that might be a translation situation over there. And such a Passover was not kept in Israel since the time of the prophet Samuel. So though they kept the Passover, it wasn't kept to this magnitude or to this level since the time of Samuel. Yea, all the kings of Israel held not such a Passover as Josiah's. And the priests and the Levites and the Jews held with all Israel that were found dwelling at Jerusalem. See, so pretty much Josiah's Passover was a pretty grand Passover where you had the Levites, the priests, and you notice it says in all the Jews, right? Which, when you look into it, the Jews was like a term that was used to collectively describe the southern kingdom, right? The Levi, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. But it also mentions all Israel that were found dwelling at Jerusalem, because you also had certain Israelites from the northern kingdom that were here at Jerusalem as well. Verse 22, in the 18th year of the reign of Josiah was this Passover kept. And the works of Josiah, and the works of Josiah were upright before his Lord with an heart full of godliness. And you can read about that in the book of Kings, you know, what he did, so on and so forth. As for the things that came to pass in his time, they were written in former times, concerning those that sinned and did wickedly against the Lord above all people and kingdoms, and how they grieved him exceedingly, so that the words of the Lord rose up against Israel. So basically, the things that were written, the things that came to pass were written in former times, meaning it was prophesied, right, concerning those that sinned, that the Lord was going to bring this judgment that came to pass upon them for their wickedness. Okay. And as it says here, they did wickedly against the Lord above all people and kingdoms, and how they grieved him exceedingly. So basically, this is the emphasis on the level of iniquity and wickedness. I mean, and we're talking about blatant disrespect, blatant, like the Lord says, don't do this, and they do that, and they do it like above and beyond, which is why it grieved the Lord, as it says, so that the words of the Lord rose up against Israel, or in other words, he cast judgment against Israel. Now, after all these acts of Josiah, it came to pass that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, came to raise war at Carchemish upon Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. So at this point, right, take a quick pause and let's analyze this, right? So at the time of Josiah, right, around the we'll say the late 600s BC, where what we had Israel, we've seen what's going on here in Israel. But at this point in time, there was actually a lot that was happening, on a secular level, right? At this point in time, the Assyrian Empire was being taken down, right? You had the Babylonians, right, along with the Scythians, and the Medes, okay, which included the Persians because of how they dwelt. But they pretty much had formed an alliance and started to take over Assyria, because they all hated the Assyrians. And at this point, or at least prior, the Assyrian Empire was the major empire at the time. So they were pretty much wiping them out, taking down their capital and all of that. And the last location or stronghold that the Assyrians fled to or try to hold up on was Carchemish. And so, and I'm going to read a bit of context about that, but the reason Pharaoh is going up there right now is because he's basically going up there to join that war to help the Assyrians, because they were allied, to help the Assyrians fight off the Medes and the Babylonians and the Scythians. But that didn't go too well. Okay, so let's read a little bit about that here. If you look up the Battle of Carchemish, it says here, the Battle of Carchemish was fought around 605 BC. So this gives you a bit of a timeline as to when this situation here with Josiah and Pharaoh Necho happened, or could have happened. It says this was between the armies of Egypt allied with the remnants of the army of the former Assyrian Empire against the armies of Babylonia, allied with the Medes, Persians, and Scythians. This was while Nebuchadnezzar was commander-in-chief and Nabopolassar was still king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar became king right after this battle, right? So Nabopolassar was his father. He was the one who really started that revolt against the Assyrians, and sort of became like that head over the Babylonians. And then it went up to his son Nebuchadnezzar, and of course they were Assyrians themselves. I believe Nabopolassar was an Assyrian general, but you can look further into that if you want more details on that. So for the background, it says here, when the Assyrian capital, Nineveh, was overrun by the Medes, Scythians, and Babylonians, and their allies in 612 BC, the Assyrians moved their capital to Haran. So in 612, when they took down the Assyrian capital, which was originally Nineveh, the Assyrians moved their capital to Haran. And when Haran was captured by the alliance in 609 BC, ending the Assyrian Empire, remnants of the Assyrian army joined Carchemish, a city under Egyptian rule on the Euphrates. And if you want to know where that is, if we just look up Carchemish map, take an image, look at some images here. Okay, you can probably use this here. So you can see here, this is Babylon, and this is Carchemish over here. Okay, and so Pharaoh Necho was going from here, trying to travel through, because of where Israel was positioned, we were sort of like that middle area. Remember, this region here is mainly like mountains. So the path, it wasn't just like, straight across, like you can see this arrow here. So the path was mainly usually something like this, and vice versa. And you had I think this is the Via Maris, which is a way by the sea. And then you also had the King's Highway, which I believe was somewhere along this side that connected to like Damascus and then takes you all the way. So what Pharaoh Necho was trying to do is he was trying to go along the coast and then cut through Megiddo and then, try to get a fast route to Carchemish. But he had to go through Israel. And that was a problem because that's when Josiah came out against him. So when we go back here, we read a little bit more. It says here, Egypt, a former vassal of Assyria, was allied with Assyrian king Ashur-uballit II and marched in 609 BC to his aid against the Babylonians. The Egyptian army of Pharaoh Necho II was delayed at Megiddo by the forces of King Josiah of Judah. Josiah was killed, and his army was defeated at the Battle of Megiddo. The Egyptians and the Assyrians together crossed the Euphrates and laid siege to Haran, which they failed to retake. When they then retreated to northwestern Assyria in what is now northeastern Syria. But basically they didn't do too well over there. So you can see here the Egyptians met the full might of the Babylonian and Median army led by Nebuchadnezzar II at Carchemish, where the combined Egyptian and Assyrian forces were destroyed. Assyria ceased to exist as an independent power, and Egypt retreated and was no longer a significant force in the ancient Near East. Babylonia reached its economic peak around or after 605 BC. So that's what happened there. So when we go back to what we're reading of here, and what's interesting here about Josiah, how he died or why he went and did this, I'll read a precept here which I found pretty interesting about that. So it says here in verse 25, now after all these acts of Josiah, it came to pass that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, came to raise war at Carchemish upon Euphrates. Now you understand what was going on. And Josiah went out against him. But the king of Egypt sent to him, saying, what have I to do with thee, O king of Judah or Judea? So I'm not here for you. I have no business with you. I have no quarrel with you. I am not sent out. I am not sent out from the Lord God against thee, for my war is upon Euphrates. Now the Lord is with me, yea, the Lord is with me, hasting me forward. Depart from me and be not against the Lord. And, keep in mind, right, that all of these nations, they believe that, their God is the Most High, or is the God. So Pharaoh is basically saying here, the Lord sent me not to come against you. I don't have a problem with you. Okay, he sent me to go up to the Euphrates, and do what I got to do. So don't make yourself an enemy by coming against me. Verse 28, howbeit Josias did not turn back his chariot from him, but undertook to fight with him, not regarding the words of the prophet Jeremy, which is Jeremiah, spoken by the mouth of the Lord. So Josias, for some reason, just had to still go to war with Pharaoh Necho. And this is what led to his death. Verse 29, but joined battle with him in the plain of Megiddo, and the princes came against King Josias. So he went to war with Pharaoh. It says here, then said the king unto his servants, carry me away out of the battle, for I am very weak. And immediately his servants took him away out of the battle. So when you read in the book of Kings, he went to war and he basically, I believe he got hit with an arrow, if I'm not mistaken. But then they had to take him off the battlefield, but he ended up dying anyway. Then gat he up upon his second chariot, and being brought back to Jerusalem, died, and was buried in his father's sepulchre. And in all Jewry, which is Jerusalem, they mourned for Josias. Yea, Jeremy the prophet, Jeremiah, lamented for Josias, and the chief men with the women made lamentation for him unto this day. And this was given out for an ordinance to be done continually in all the nation of Israel. So let me actually read this part here. These things are written in the book of the stories of the kings of Judah, and every one of the acts that Josiah did, and his glory, and his understanding in the law of the Lord, and the things that he had done before, and the things now recited, are reported in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah, or Judea. So now let's read here something about Josiah here. Now, what I'm about to read is in 2 Kings 22 and 14. And this was something like a prophecy that was mentioned concerning Josiah. So let's read. It says, so Hilkiah the priest and Ahikam, and Achbor and Shaphan and Asahiah went unto Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikva, the son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. When it says prophetess, it doesn't mean that she was a female prophet, but the word prophetess can mean the wife of a prophet, or sometimes it can be used in the sense of one that either dreams of things that will happen in the future, or actually sings, like Miriam. And matter of fact, let's see when we look into the word here, what do we get for prophetess? Naba Ya'ah, and it says here, an ancient type endowed with gift of song. See, like Miriam. And then you see wife of Isaiah the prophet. So you have wife of a prophet, and then you have other definitions here. False prophetess, leader type consulted for a word. So these would mainly be the ones here. It says here, a prophetess or generally inspired woman, by implication a poetess, by association a prophet's wife. And sometimes they would say things, the Lord will put the Spirit on them to say things that would be prophetic, but it did not make them a prophet. Okay. So let's keep on reading. So it says here, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she dwelt in Jerusalem in the college, and they communed with her. And let's look up that word college, if it is in here. Okay, let's see what we have for that. We have Mashana, and it says double copy. So okay, second quarter or district. Let's see. college, copy, order. So I would say looks like here in order, rank, age, quality, or location. So I think this definition makes the most sense here. Anyway, nothing too much to look into over there. So let's carry on. So it says, and they communed with her, and she said unto them, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh God of Israel, Tell the man that sent you to me, which was Josiah, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I will bring evil upon this place, and upon the inhabitants thereof, even all the words of the book which the king of Judah hath read, which is the book of the Lord. Because they have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath shall be kindled against this place, and shall not be quenched. But to the king of Judah, which sent you to inquire of the Lord Yahweh, thus shall ye say to him, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh God of Israel, as touching the words which thou hast heard, because thine heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord Yahweh, when thou heardest what I spake against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and hast rent thy clothes and wept before me. I also have heard thee, saith the Lord. So basically the Lord had pronounced judgment against Israel, and this was mainly going to happen by the Lord raising up or bringing the Babylonians against us, right, to destroy the temple, destroy the walls, and take us captive. But here, concerning Josiah, right, it says, Behold, therefore, I will gather thee unto thy fathers, which means you're going to die. When you're gathered unto your fathers, you're dead. And thou shalt be gathered into thy grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring upon this place. And they brought the king word again. So the reason I said this was interesting is because what was said concerning Josiah was that he would die before the evil the Lord brought upon Israel. And that evil, we know, was when he brought the Babylonians, against Israel and they did that damage, right? Now, when you actually look at the sequence of events, it kind of makes sense why Josiah was so hard-headed and the Lord put the spirit on him to go to war with Pharaoh Necho, because it wasn't long after Josiah died that the Babylonians came against us and eventually, laid siege and destroyed all these things. But Josiah wasn't alive to see it. As the Lord said, he would be gathered to his fathers, so he wouldn't see that evil that would come upon us. So that's just something that I found interesting there. Wanted to point that out. So let's keep on going. Verse 34. And the people took Joachaz, the son of Josias, which in the book of Kings, his name is Jehoahaz, right? The son of Josias, and made him king instead of Josias his father, when he was 23 years old. So Josias dies in war, and the people put up his son Jehoahaz as the king. And he reigned in Judea and in Jerusalem 3 months. So he reigned for a short period of time. And then the king of Egypt deposed him from reigning in Jerusalem. So if we look up here, Jehoahaz, that is just disrespectful, man. You got him looking like this. Anyway, Jehoahaz of Judah. So it says here, also called Shalom, was the 17th king of Judah. 3 months he reigned in 609, and the 4th son of Josiah. Now let's read about his reign and what happened here. So although he was 2 years younger than his brother Eliakim, he was elected to succeed his father on the throne at the age of 23. So he wasn't the eldest. This fact attests the popularity of the young man, and probably also his political affiliations or policy as being in line with those of his father. Jehoahaz reigned for only 3 months before being deposed by the Egyptian Pharaoh Necho II and taken into Egyptian captivity. Okay. Now, let's read here, right? So it says, after the failed siege of Haran, because remember, Pharaoh Necho came through, right? He came up from Egypt, tried to go through Jerusalem. Josiah met him, went to war with him, and then Josiah died. Pharaoh Necho continued up to Carchemish because he had a job to do, right? But we read that they didn't do too well. They lost against the Babylonians. So what ended up happening? Well, let's read it here. So after the failed siege of Haran, Necho left a sizable force behind, but returned himself to Egypt. On his return march, he found that the Judeans had selected Jehoahaz to succeed his father Josiah. Necho brought Jehoahaz to Riblah and imprisoned him there. Then he deposed Jehoahaz and replaced him with his older brother Eliakim as king, changing his name to Jehoiakim. Jehoahaz had ruled for 3 months. Necho brought Jehoahaz back to Egypt as his prisoner, where Jehoahaz ended his days. The prophet Jeremiah said of him, weep bitterly for him who is exiled, because he will never return nor see his native land again. So when we go back here, that's the sequence of events. Pharaoh Necho goes up, he's trying to go to Carchemish, he gets intercepted by Josiah, they go to war, Josiah dies. Pharaoh continues up to Carchemish, and then Israel decides to put Jehoahaz on the throne. On Pharaoh's way back, he says, nope, takes Jehoahaz captive, and he sets up who he wants, which in this case was Eliakim or Jehoiakim. So verse 36, and he set a tax upon the land, this is Pharaoh, right? Set a tax upon the land of 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. The king of Egypt also made Jehoiakim, which here says Joachim, but it's Jehoiakim, like we just read, his brother, king of Judea and Jerusalem. So he was basically put in this place as a puppet king. And he bound Jehoiakim and the nobles, but Xerxes, his brother, he apprehended and brought him out of Egypt. 5 and 20 years old was Joachim when he was made king in the land of Judea and Jerusalem, and he did evil before the Lord. Wherefore against him Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up and bound him with a chain of brass and carried him into Babylon. So remember, the Egyptians lost along with the Assyrians. Pharaoh came back, and this is what he did on his way back. But now the next major world superpower was now the Babylonians. And so what did they do? They went around Nebuchadnezzar and to let the world know who's boss. So when he came and he got to Jerusalem, he said, and he took Jehoiakim out, right? And as we're about to read, he set up his own vassal king. So verse 40, wherefore against him Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up and bound him with a chain of brass and carried him into Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took of the holy vessels of the Lord and carried them away and set them in his own temple at Babylon. But those things, and that's why when you read in Daniel the 5th chapter, it talks about Belshazzar and his lords having that party, and they were drinking from the vessels of the Lord, because Nebuchadnezzar had taken them, to his temple. Because remember, these were like gold, But those things that are recorded of him and of his uncleanness and impiety are written in the Chronicles of the Kings. So you can read about Jehoiakim and the wicked things he did there. And Joachim, his son, reigned in his stead. He was made king being 18 years old. Now, it's spelled the same here, but it's actually different, right? I believe this individual here is Jeconiah, or otherwise known as Jehoiakim, okay, in the book of Kings. If we look up Jehoiakim, okay, maybe I spelled that wrong. Let's look up Jeconiah. Cool. And this should be in, we should have an account in Kings, but we do not. Let's see. Let's see if Kanai. All right, let's parse through these chapters here. Josiah's covenant. There we go. Babylon controls Jehoiakim. Yeah, so as you can see here, right, Jehoiakim, so when Nebuchadnezzar came, he basically took control. Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years, and then Jehoiakim rebelled, and so Nebuchadnezzar came and took him away, as we read in First Esdras. And then let's see where, there you go. It says, so Jehoiakim slept with his fathers, and Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his stead. So when you read it in here, it uses the same name, right? Spelled here, Joachim, same as the father. So you might get confused, but these are two different people. Okay. In here, in the verses above, verse 43 is referring to Jehoiakim or Jehoiakim, son of Josiah. In verse 43, it's referring to Jehoiakim or Kanai or Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, the grandson of Josiah. Okay, it says here, and Joachim or Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his stead. He was made king, being 18 years old, and reigned but 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and did evil before the Lord. So after a year, Nebuchadnezzar sent and caused him to be brought into Babylon with the holy vessels of the Lord. So he was taken captive to Babylon. And during this time, right, you had a couple of exiles where Nebuchadnezzar, when he came, he took captives with him, people that were of the royal seed, Daniel, the 3 holy children. You know, he also took people, important people of the land, farmers, carpenters, people that were useful. And he also took Ezekiel as well. So when you read the book of Ezekiel, like we went through, you understand the setting is in Babylon, because that's where Ezekiel is. Verse 46, and made Zedekiah, king of Judea and Jerusalem, when he was 21 years old, and he reigned 11 years. And he did evil also in the sight of the Lord, and cared not for the word that were, or the words that were spoken unto him by the prophet Jeremiah from the mouth of the Lord. And after that, King Nebuchadnezzar had made him to swear by the name of the Lord. He forswore himself and rebelled, and hardening his heart, he transgressed the laws of the Lord God of Israel. So in other words, Nebuchadnezzar made him take an oath, because he was the new Nebuchadnezzar set him up as the new vassal king, but he ended up rebelling against Nebuchadnezzar. All right, and he had also transgressed against the ordinances of the Lord. It says here, the governors also of the people and the priests did many things against the laws, and passed all the pollutions of all nations, and defiled the temple of the Lord, which was sanctified in Jerusalem. So they started going off. They started doing a lot of, unlawful things. Both the king and the governors and the people, the princes, the priests, all of them. Nevertheless, the God of their fathers sent by his messenger to call them back, because he spared them and his tabernacle also. And this is also mentioned in 2 Chronicles 36, how the Lord had mercy, had compassion on his people, and sent prophets, rising up betimes, to go and warn them. Right? Verse 51, but they had his messengers in derision. And look, when the Lord spake unto them, they made a sport of his prophets. So they made a joke out of the Lord's prophets, when the prophets were there to warn them about the things that were coming. Same thing they do today. So what happened? So far forth that he, being wroth with his people, wroth meaning angry, for their great ungodliness, commanded the kings of the Chaldees to come up against them. So the Lord put the spirit upon Nebuchadnezzar to come up against, Jerusalem, but this time not to set up another vassal king, but to destroy it. Who slew their young men with the sword, yea, even within the compass of their holy temple. So they were slaying them, whether they were in the temple or in the holy, they everywhere, and spared neither young man nor maid, old man nor child among them, for he delivered all into their hands. And they took all the holy vessels of the Lord, both great and small, with the vessels of the ark of God, and the king's treasures, and carried them away into Babylon. As for the house of the Lord, they burnt it, so they burnt the temple, and brake down the walls of Jerusalem, and set fire upon her towers. So they pretty much destroyed everything. And this is why we needed, after the Babylonian captivity, we went back to rebuild the temple. And then during the time of Nehemiah, he went back to basically rebuild the walls. Verse 56, as for her glorious things, they never ceased till they had consumed and brought them all to naught. And this shows you the wrath of the Lord. So he put the spirit on the Babylonians to basically, not chill until they had done, all these things, brought every glorious thing to naught. And the people that were not slain with the sword, he carried into or onto Babylon as captives, who became servants to him and his children, till the Persians reigned, to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremy, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. The whole time of her desolation shall she rest, until the full term of 70 years, which is roughly around that time. And that's pretty much the end of First Esdras, the first chapter. So a pretty lengthy chapter, but it gives a full recap of, from the time of Josiah on to, the Lord bringing up the Babylonians against us, and then ultimately on to the time of the Persians, right? Which is where we're going to go into, continuing in the timeline here. So Lord willing, that was clear and edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rechak, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.